who contributed. Okay, let me see if I can navigate this. Doesn't seem to work. Up. There we go. Sorry. Okay, so thanks to everyone who contributed, who's on the call. First of all, it's your information primarily put together, and try to kind of mix it all together into getting some conclusions across the portfolio. So this evaluation, of course, was, as you know, taking place sometime in May, June this year. That's when I did the data gathering. And the objectives of here is really to look at the results, assess the implementation of this kind of portfolio of projects on livelihood support under the healing component of the strategy of IRCT. And I looked then at all the 19 member centers who had received subgrants. Not all of you were interviewed, but you know, because of time limitations, we have to do a little bit of a sampling. But I looked at all the documentation from everyone, so that's it basically. And yeah, it's meant to inform the future strategy, as Lisa mentioned as well. Here are the evaluation questions. So the impact, the effectiveness, and the sustainability mostly. And I will get to those when I go through the presentation, so I won't spend too much time on those. The evidence base then, 34 in-depth interviews, 1 focus group we managed to have, even though virtually, with the torture survivors, and of course quite extensive then document review across all of the subgrants and the various publications, and also websites of organizations, etc. So that's it. So we start with the impact and relevance then, the first evaluation question. So the key finding 1 for me was that the why livelihoods integration is important. The why is clear, but the how maybe needs a little bit more of attention going forward in a nutshell. And so there was a very successful documentation of the why, and people seem to have really built up use this pilot, this first round of grants to really build up or these first 2 rounds of grants to really build up the experience on, and the kind of testing the models and documenting it, and having a strong story of why this is important based on torture survivors' needs, and why it can make a difference, as some people say, between just surviving and thriving, right? So the proof of concept, I think, was well established. There's a high degree of motivation among member centers, and also the relevance seemed to be applicable to 2 kind of main audiences here, both internally influencing the anti-global movement in general, which I believe has not been so active in working on livelihood support before, and also externally linking into kind of the broader principles under the SDGs and the leaving no one behind agenda. So there are 2 kind of main audiences for this. And what was less systematized so far was maybe more on like the actual integration of the livelihood support, and especially maybe in the international advocacy efforts. But there are some good, of course, practice examples among members, and lots of experience has been built up now on also how to do this, especially also since there has been this ongoing peer exchange throughout. So maybe next phase, one could also focus more on documenting that more systematically. Okay, so key finding 2 on the impact: every subgrant produced outcomes benefiting survivors, but an overarching framework would help. And some people said that very explicitly, and that is also something to bring with us for the next phase maybe. So just to unpack that a bit. So the way I went about this was I tried to sort of systematize and go through and log all the different outcomes or intermediate outcomes. And that's defined as changes in behavior, systems, also institutional systems of practice at a formal, informal, individual or collective level. So beyond outputs. Of course, I also noted if there were some only outputs because the projects were quite short, but really it's interesting more to see what actually changed here, right? So I think that's quite a lot, 82 out of a fairly small portfolio after all, and fairly small grants. So that's quite impressive. But results were more significant when subgrants complemented existing activities. Significant, I mean, they were more kind of impressive, more substantial, right? So that meant when there was more of a holistic approach adopted, and when there was like seen as not a standalone activity, but something that complemented already existing and ongoing activities. Most frequently quoted results were at an individual informal level, so the psychosocial side. This is not so again, under it's like regaining hope for the future, breaking self-stigma, reducing stress, etc. This is not so surprising because that was really the main focus, I think, even when the call was issued to members. But it's just to note here that that's where the results were found. And again, they were, even though they were at an individual informal level, they were more likely to be sustained if they included elements of trust building, if they actually took the individual beyond the individual. If there was elements of trust building between, for instance, the survivor and service providers, or if there was some peer engagement or interaction with groups or joint problem solving among subgroups of livelihood beneficiaries, etc., that seemed to have had more of an effect overall. Some examples of improved physical health conditions as well, linked to increased ability to afford food and medicines, mostly on an anecdotal level, but nevertheless. And but the economic benefits, however, they varied a lot, and they were less systematically documented, though there was some positive anecdotal evidence from many of the projects I spoke to. Okay, so this image is just to show a little bit the framework I used to kind of then cluster and try to analyze these various results, which might also be helpful to make the point that those that made kind of more of a holistic, had a more of a holistic approach, had a more better effect. So if you look at the upper left quadrant, quadrant 1, there's more on the sort of formal individual level. So retention in counseling, rehabilitation efforts, certification from completed training, improved earnings, employment, access to credit, so things that formally actually happen at an individual level. On the upper right, then we have more on the sort of formal and collective level, which could be that the groups actually registered, agriculture groups or VSLA groups registered with local authorities. There was an MOU with national employment, etc., which of course complements, and then if you go down to quadrant 3 there on the lower right, then we look at more sort of the informal collective side, and there we have results like social stigma reduced, increased community acceptance, improved family relations, reduced community fear of human insecurity, social cohesion, team skills in problem solving, etc. So, and then on the more sort of individual informal side, again, there we have all those I stated before, the more of the psychosocial maybe benefits of hope, self-confidence, decrease in suicidal thoughts, stress, depression, reduction, etc., etc. But this was used to kind of say that if you have, if the approaches kind of try to take all those aspects into account, of course you maybe had more significant impact on the beneficiaries. So we talked, well, I mentioned that an overall framework would help and people talked about that. And so this was what I came up with, and based on the evaluation findings, as a sort of theory of change, also because actually there are a lot of things going on at different levels here. At the RICT global level, of course, the subgrants happened, but there was also this facilitated peer learning, and there was partnership building, advocacy, research, experience sharing, etc. And of course, that should ideally link then into an international community that is more responsive to the needs of torture survivors, or also from the perspective of their economic and livelihood needs. And of course, at Member Center, this is the main thing where you had lots of activities, and you also created the actual evidence-based for peer-based learning. And then, of course, survival level, where all the results then can be seen. And I think the dark arrows here, they are where you could see some direct results from this evaluation. So some actual psychosocial benefits, economic benefits, etc. The actual the others are sort of pathways, because I think it's too short to really judge the very long-term effects. But you could see that there were at least pathways to, psychosocial and economic self-reliance, even if self-reliance would be a bit more optimistic to hope for in such a short time frame sometimes. Okay, let's continue. But this is just one way of depicting it, clearly. There are many other ways to do it. Okay. Conscious of time here, so let's see. Okay, so key finding 3 then on impact. Providing support for livelihoods can help tackle communal and systemic issues that contribute to exclusion. And I separated this out as a separate finding only because it seemed to be, it came up almost in all my conversations, but it wasn't very well documented. So maybe one could just make sure that that also is captured. But for instance, there were some important examples of projects that adapted and shifted in their approaches from being very focused on the individual rehabilitation only to actually linking up more to contributing to local economic development and social cohesion. And that then broadened their potential to create new and wider or different kinds of partnerships, also potential funders, when you go beyond just individual rehabilitation, which is maybe a space that is more traditionally the space where people work. So documentation of contribution to such collective benefits, of course, they can be more difficult to assess and document, but it's important to do so because I think that builds a more complete case for the actual contributions of this type of work. Okay. Effectiveness and efficiency. So here, oops, sorry. Here, the first finding then is that IRCT is a valuable partner for member centers. Not surprising maybe, but nevertheless important, because of course this is an evaluation also of IRCT's performance in all of this, not just the member centers, what they produce. So, but there was also clear that the continued support from IRCT is in demand among members. So there's a high degree of satisfaction in the way this was managed, and yes, exactly. So, but there was this is quite a new area of work for many. So they said this continued support in one way or the other. Of course, financial support is good, but also this knowledge creation, sharing, brokering new partnerships are seen as important. And also they pointed out that RCT has been, for many, one of the few partners they have to actually support this work. So very important, groundbreaking, but also important not to give that up too fast or to shift too radically going forward. Key finding 2 here. Yes, so the use of funds and reporting, I mean, how you use the funds, given that they're quite small grants, and how they are reported on, would benefit from being more streamlined in a synthesized way. So increasing the focus on the how and demonstrate complementarity. Some projects had a high startup cost. There was a lot of testing if this approach was good, was there proof of concept. There were sort of experimental approaches with treatment groups and control groups, etc. But before they actually got into actually giving support to a small group, quite a bit of the money and time had already passed, right? So hopefully that cost can be reduced going forward, because now the proof of concept is sort of there, and you know, maybe less on the sort of more experimental design approaches. So there's, of course, it's good to have a very rigorous evidence base, but maybe now focusing more on collecting that evidence around actual implementation and changes rather than on the testing of the concept could be an idea. The quality of the reporting varied greatly. So a simple, I mean, this is clearly a small grant and one of many that member centers have to manage. So a simpler reporting format is good, but maybe a more streamlined one, pushing more towards those kind of documenting those outcomes. Not just anecdotal or individual testimonials, but also a little bit more on a project-wide level, so that you can cluster them and group them, etc. And the third finding in this area, well, there is a lot of good gender disaggregated data out there. I mean, I have to look at this as well, of course, and it exists, but it's not used so much, surprisingly, for analysis and learning. and that's understandable, because of course there are many dimensions, and gender is only one aspect, but there are many other intersecting dimensions as well, of disability, age, etc. But since the data is there, maybe at least one could do a little bit more with that data. So basically, while it's done as a good practice, it's not necessarily used so much. And it could maybe be, I mean, it could be either be a point of learning for peer learning, or it could be a way to detect patterns of marginalization or risk about certain subgroups that could, in the context of livelihoods, of course, or detect groups that could maybe benefit from a more targeted support based on age or disability patterns or whatever. So that type of analysis could be interesting, and maybe it's not for member centers to do themselves. Maybe that's something that IRCT maybe would want to, lift to a more kind of cross portfolio type of level of analysis. But just to point that out. The assessment criteria for project proposals could prioritize complementarity and leverage potential. That's another thing. So we're looking at how these projects were actually ranked and selected. It was very hard to see how they kind of, how to what extent they would kind of use this kind of quite small grant to leverage or upscale something already existing. And that could be more interesting going forward. The simple proposal format was appreciated, but many were conceptualized or at least presented as very standalone projects, which had to do everything from identification of beneficiaries to to training of trainers, and it would be interesting to see, could there not be a case where, for instance, if you have only this much, you only have like 10,000 euro, for instance, could it be that another existing project could you use that money to integrate the livelihoods component into that, rather than having a separate standalone project on livelihoods, maybe on completely different beneficiaries? So that was very hard to really grasp when you looked at the assessment criteria for project proposals. And it was also hard as an evaluator, and this is said in a way that this could be improved, that to assess what share or specific subgroups of members' overall number of associated survivors were benefiting. I mean, sometimes when I looked across like a member center, they have 22,000 that they have kind of, that they somehow beneficiary from their work, but then what percentage or which subgroup of those are then benefiting, right? When you see that 150 then received livelihood support. So how do I put that together? So in the proposals, they could also be more of a connection maybe between the core activities of the center and what subgroup, on what basis they will then receive like livelihood support, or yeah, the rationale. And again, partnerships were, as far as I could tell, across the portfolio, primarily consultants or training institutes paid for by the subgrants. That's, of course, again, normal because some of the capacity was not already existing in the member centers, but it's also expensive. And some of the other potential partnerships are not so consistently described or assessed. Even when they existed, there were some good examples there of working with INGOs, for instance, in certain areas, but it wasn't clear to me how that was then, taken into account for this proposal or this round of subgrants. Yeah. Okay. So given this is linked basically to that. So given the big demand for support among survivors, the resources are sometimes spread thinly, and so that's a bit of an issue. So there is going forward, one could look at that, right? How it could be more used in a kind of as a leverage fund. Yeah. And as I said, many had quite heavy investments in the actual selection process of beneficiaries. Instead of kind of integrating the assessment and readiness for support already in other types of services, right? So in other types of assessment practices. Yeah, and this some people raise this as the survivors' demands and expectations on livelihood support can be also an area of concern. I mean, how to handle those high expectations to what can actually be delivered, right? So I just include a quote from one of the member centers reporting that describes that. Okay. And then finally, we have sustainability. Are we doing on time? Yeah, we still have time.
You're very good on time,
I'm good
Charlotte.
on time. Good. No, because there's a lot to get through here. So, okay. Excellent. Also looking forward to have some discussion afterwards. Okay. So when you talk about sustainability for this, of course, self-reliance, if that is our agreed goal, but that is the goal that we have set, self-reliance as a goal implies that support should trigger change, but not go on forever. So in a sense, one shouldn't expect necessarily that funding should continue forever to the same beneficiaries, because then, of course, their self-reliance concept is a bit undermined. So in that sense, I think it's more important maybe to look at not so much, yes, funds are short and limited, but what is the catalytic effect, and how is the catalytic effect best kind of demonstrated through this type of support? So there were some good examples of that, where I think it was, for instance, in Kosovo, where very small grants, but very timely with some accompaniment and etc. And a very rigorous process of training and coaching really meant that people, beneficiaries, could manage on their own quite soon afterwards. So it really had a clear catalytic effect. Whereas others, it seemed like it's unclear because it's training and then more is needed and more needed, and then you don't know what happens. So there is this, even if funding is shortened, hopefully catalytic in a way, there is still this need for follow-up and continuous check-ins. And of course, the short-term nature of projects and funding is limiting in that regard. But then would be interesting to see, can then that follow-up be somehow woven into other types of activities? And in some cases they were, but that seemed to be good practice, right? So at least even if the funding is over, there will be repetitious check-ins with the beneficiaries, not just on the livelihoods component, but maybe in connection to something else, right? Yes. Okay. And also, it could also be smart to be more explicit about what sustainability means in different contexts. In some contexts and very difficult situations, it might not need to be sustainable economically, but it could just be sustainable from like improvement on certain other aspects in relation to helping the rehabilitation journey for individuals. But it would be better to state that up front and also to be more explicit in the monitoring about that. And in general, I think, because when you talk about livelihoods in general, I think it's easy to think money and income, et cetera, et cetera. But to be more realistic, have realistic targets in that area to actual monitoring it, but also say what is expected, setting the bar, for that where it is where it's more reasonable. Because without that kind of without that target, or without that kind of leveling of expectations on what's, then you think there will be some economic benefits, and it's not necessarily always very clear what those are. Okay. Second finding here, a sustainability factor more on a programmatic level, I think, is that there's a high degree of interest and ownership by member centers to ensure that there is a continuation of this. They ask for it, they are very active. So we can see also from participation in this call. But of course, the lack of funding makes internal integration more difficult. And people talked about that in a sense that there is limited funding in this space right now. And if you hire a consultant even if you needed someone on staff to do the follow-up, you can't necessarily, because the consultant then is no longer there. And also some even felt that this was an activity, but to put it in the strategy would be too much because it would raise too many expectations when we don't have funding secured and there is no kind of funding pathways really clear to them. So more thinking is probably needed in terms of how to really support integration as well into of livelihoods activities into core activities. So just to unpack that a bit. Yes, but many did, though, say that they had increased their internal capacity very much just from doing this work, and that they felt that they could now take on more or do more in this space. So we're more looking at pathways and funding avenues and way to kind of almost package and promote these new skills to the outside world. and needed some maybe support in that. Like how do you now kind of take this to the next level? And then I did look at all the annual reports, and as I said, everyone who received funding clearly showed up somewhere in the annual reports, but only in a few cases then, if you compare, did they actually seem to go into the action plans and strategies. Some also expressed an internal hesitation among staff initially because it's a new area and beyond the core expertise and comfort zone of some. Most are doctors and psychologists, and they didn't feel that necessarily they've had legitimacy in this space. But that's part of building up this learning journey, and also it's part of also maybe making some other partnerships going forward. And in a couple of cases, which I included here, there were some good practices also. For instance, involvement of local government. Sri Lanka is a good example of that. And that kind of helped to give that legitimacy. And also, I see that Kay is here. The establishment of a formal MOU with the National Employment Agency in Albania. It's also one way of kind of carving out space and niche and legitimacy in the national context, so that you can kind of, increase membership, increase partnerships, and hopefully have more of a sustainable approach going forward. So yeah, that's it about that. And the third finding here then is that leveraging partnerships and funding needs good coordination, knowledge sharing, and what I said, building a strong case around both the why and the how. So, and in this sense, just to unpack that a bit, oops, yes, some noted, quite a few actually, that there's still pretty much very much of a siloed approach with this type of work. In the rehabilitation field, even internally, I mean, externally, yes, with different organizations focusing on different things and funding different things, but also internally, where, it was even hard for some to get the livelihoods people to speak to the psychosocial people and for them to understand each other. So there is maybe a little bit of work to do there, but it's also a reflection of, people noted, external funding patterns, right? So building a track record in the how of integration was considered important. See. I see. And also in relation to forming these, maybe thinking of new forms of partnerships, on how to do that, and how to form those new kinds of partnerships using a multi-pronged approach, meaning that everyone has a role in that. I mean, IRCT could maybe open doors at a more global level, or as you do, bring up good examples to the international community at large. That this is actually, I mean, this is something member centers are doing and are capable of doing, but also to develop some tools and common tools and approaches, and to maybe tailor such tools and approaches also a little bit to maybe non-specialist NGOs or INGOs, and even local employers, etc., so that they can get engaged. I think it's been, I mean, could easily be seen as a quite specialized field, and that might also make it more difficult for others to get involved or to partner up on this issue. I just included here like one good practice for building internal capacity. For instance, what that all the field officers in one organization, they had to sit through the same trainings as all the beneficiaries got, just to build that internal capacity at all levels. So it's not just driven from the top by one external consultant who then leaves, but to really get it trickling down in the organization to even the people who have more day-to-day or first point of contact in some cases with the survivors. So that was just, and there are other good examples, but they are in the report. There are lots of more examples in the report. I can go through the recommendations, or we can just open up. Would you want me to scroll through them quickly, or?
I think you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Or what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's only 3 slides.
Yeah, no, but it's totally fine. This is very informative, so
Okay.
go ahead.
I mean, they're very linked to what we already talked about. So in a sense, and they're mostly for IRCT now, right? So let me just get to that. Yeah, so I think there is a case for building, for like continue to really move into systematizing how to do this in a good way, maybe to cluster lessons a little bit more on how to operationalize livelihood support. So I've just synthesized the recommendations here, so you can read them later when you have more time. Setting more realistic targets, especially when it comes to economic or income related indicators, and also maybe to look at those quadrants to have maybe some targets more reporting more in a more holistic way, or conceptualizing projects in a more holistic way. So not just to focus on individual benefits, but maybe to look a little bit broader than that. Okay. And on the effectiveness, well, here we talked about the importance of brokering partnerships at different levels, and to help members develop guidelines and tools so that there's more of a mutual understanding of this issue, and also how to kind of almost how to pitch it to external partners, or how to explain it in a good way to potential partners. Having clear guidelines on subgranting, and also revising we talked about that, revising the reporting format to be less activity based, and to capture more those more sort of more overall rationale of the program. So this is basically just echoing what I just talked about, but nevertheless, and yeah, see what could be interesting for cross portfolio analysis and reflection and documentation. So I know that you've done this, you've had this peer check-ins on a monthly basis, and maybe to make them a little more problem focused, or really to see, okay, what are people struggling with, or where are the blind spots, you know, what are we missing? More than just showing best example, we could also learn from maybe where people have more problems, or to focus the discussions about particular problems that people run into, even funding, like even how to approach local funders, or how to build partners, etc. Could be maybe one of those peer discussion topics. And then to make sure that projects are not too thinly stretched, so that the selection criteria of beneficiaries are clear and transparent, but also that you know that funds are actually going to each, you know, to the beneficiaries, and not to too many other things. I mean, I really, even in the report, tried to calculate, because how much money actually went into different, you know, if you take the whole budget and you divide it by number of beneficiaries, right? It's interesting to see how much you actually invest and how many people you say benefit. So it's not only about getting many people, it's also getting sufficient amount to each individual beneficiary. So that's all. And finally, then on sustainability, yes, to have kind of be more explicit about what is reasonable, and to use that as a way of also measuring sustainability going forward. I mean, for instance, some projects talk about you know, that the main goal was self-sufficient within 6 months or something from starting a new business. I mean, I've started my consultancy business. Let me tell you, not even I was self-sufficient after 6 months. So, and I, you know, I'm sitting here. So, I think some expectations were just too put too high. So more realistic expectations, and also to see how, you know, the leveraging, right, in relation to other projects. And yes, and then for RST to continue to prioritize and spend time on this agenda, because there is very good, I think it was an overall very positive evaluation from a quite limited time of support and limited support. So I think with this startup, you could really do something. I think also because IRCT is one of the few now actors pushing this in the anti-torture movement, so to speak, the broader movement, and others also said that. So they are looking to RCT for good examples on this, and they exist. So I hope this evaluation contributed to demonstrating that. That's all I have for now. I'd rather just stop here and take questions and have discussion. Thanks.
Perfect, Charlotte. This was a really, really good, informative, clear presentation of the evaluation you conducted. Now we thought the next, maybe Lisa, I'm thinking maybe we can take a couple of questions if there are any on the presentation of Charlotte,
Yeah, for sure.
and then we
For
can
sure.
open the discussion. I don't know if there are any questions or reflections on the results presented, on the recommendations. Did it provoke any thought? Okay, if
Yes,
there are no,
My
if there are
question,
no, yeah,
my-
go ahead, Abdullahi.
yes, my question is on the chat box. So please review it.
Ah, si vous parlez français, vous avez de l'interprétation. Mais je le peux lire. I can read it. But just so you know, there's also interpretation, Abdullahi. But I can read it. Abdullahi's question is to Charlotte. He's asking, can we add our activity on poverty assessment issue for livelihood support to torture victim with relatives? So I understand the new element would be relatives. I don't really, I'm not
Yeah.
sure you understand the question, Charlotte.
Sort of. I mean, okay, I did not, okay, the evaluation, I did not necessarily distinguish because it wasn't so clear from the projects how much went to, how much relatives benefited as opposed to individual torture victims or, so that, but that could be, I think that's one of the things I think one could report on more clearly, to be honest. So, and all those breakdowns could be clear, and just, I think the evaluation has finished, but I think in the future, making those links, and I should have said that, so it's a very good point, that those links to poverty assessment and poverty reduction, I think are very interesting, because that's a way also to link maybe into other, other efforts to promote local economic development, or to other kind of more mainstream poverty reduction programs and so forth. So sure, I mean the links to poverty reduction is very important, and if you already do a poverty assessment, then I think it's very easy to tag on that livelihood support program, or to sort of integrate it with that, right? So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank-
Yes, go ahead, Abdullahi.
No, I am satisfied. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks to you, Abdullahi. So, I mean, I don't see any more hands up. If there are no more questions, we have, well, Lisa has prepared a couple of questions. And I can also see a lot of members, RCT members that implemented livelihoods projects online. I can see Tree of Life, ARCT, Marteso, KRCT, HDO, Sri Lanka, Prawa. So please feel free to jump in if you have any comments or observations. But otherwise, I will give the floor to Lisa.
Thanks, Berta. My pleasure. And I mean, both to all the member centers who, have been with us on this journey and took advantage of this opportunity, and maybe your own, right? I think it's been fascinating to watch. And I think Charlotte really picked this up, that, this peer group that was kind of the motivators, and they're meeting regularly. And it was a group, I think 5 or 6 in the beginning, that just kind of moved this thing, kept the conversation going, kept a monthly meeting where they knew each other. I think the trust grew between that group. And I think the opportunity to, to share and exchange seems to be one of the really key core learnings. And Charlotte, I'm really happy that you pointed that out, because I think, you know, that's a space that we can continue now with some of these very clear recommendations to say to you as members, if you feel that that methodology, right, of having a core group of people who are going to be meeting regularly, and maybe as Charlotte points out, systematize that interaction a little bit more. That this could be a key part of moving this thing continued forward and growing it. But I want to test that with you and a couple of the questions that I have, because I think it's really interesting to see how something like, and I'm just going to pop in, and they're not exactly in a very theoretical or structured order, but this thing about, for example, catalytic effect, right? Exactly, being a catalyst, being able to incorporate this piece of work in such a way that it actually grew. And I'm going to direct one question to begin with at the center in Kosovo. So Julieta, I think you're with us here. And for any others who might think that, you know, the piece of work they did also had this kind of impact, right, or this effect. Why was it that you approached it in such a way? I mean, did you go in intentionally thinking, okay, there's a multiplier effect, or there's a catalytic effect I can achieve by doing it in this way? Or is that something you planned to do, or is this something that kind of just evolved? And if you could speak a little bit about that, because if others want to copy it, it's good to know your logic.
Yeah.
Julieta?
Thank you. Yes. Actually, when we started to implement the project, right in the beginning, me as a project manager had a thorough consultation with the psychologist who were in a very close contact with the women survivors that we were going to include in the project activities. So the first thing that I wanted to hear from them, it was the mental health. Who of those women are more or less prepared to enter in the activities, in the project activities, such as training, then filling out the applications, signing the contracts, and going through buying the things that they needed to start their businesses. So we initially, actually the psychologist selected 20 women that they thought that these women are ready to start, to be included in this project. They have done a pre-evaluation mental health assessment to all those 20 women. And then we continued with the training of the of these women. Actually, what was very important that I would like to stress out now is that majority of these women never have had the chance to attend a training before. So for the first time in their life, they attended a training. So they were very happy to be a part of that training and to learn the things, to gain new knowledges that they never had a chance before to do that. Also, all these women have had some basic skills that psychologists were known about that in order to start. So in order to start with the businesses. So after the training, actually I assisted them, but they were very happy to fill out the applications. And then we created the commission, and we were about to distribute 8 sub-grants. But since we had not that big amount of money, of budget, as you know, with this project, but nevertheless, we decided to sub-grant 16 women who were able to buy the things, the items that they could start their businesses or expand their very small businesses that they already had. Then another very important part was the signing of contracts after the revision of the applications and the Commission's decision. They were also very happy to sign the contracts, because majority of them for the first time signed the contracts in order to have something on their own, which was very also important for, and had a very good impact in their mental health. And then immediately we continued with the purchase of the items, and immediately they started to apply. They started the businesses in order for us to have enough time to see how it goes and to continue with the advices that they would need in order to proceed with their production, mainly production and selling of their products. So there was a period of more or less 3 months that we were kind of monitoring, but also advising them in their startup businesses.
Mm. And the fact that, as Charlotte pointed out, and Charlotte, maybe you can also hop in if you want to sharpen this question I'm asking, but the idea that it was catalytic, right? It was a stimulus, right? It was combining both the mental health and the livelihoods, right? The income generation. And I understand there will also be spin-offs after this, right? There were other implications of potential others having new businesses out of this or growing their businesses. And this could be one of those, you know, and how can we make this small grants grow in and of themselves in the way that you've organized it?
Actually, I would give one example. One woman already had a very small business, a very small shop selling like foods, kind of pies. In that shop, but since she didn't have a space where the clients would sit and have the food in that shop, she had a very low incomes. But with this fund, we enabled her to make this fence of one of the place outside the shop, and the business grew up significantly. Because up to 40 clients could sit in that area and have the meals, enjoy the meals, and most of them also then buy also for the house or for different events. So the business with this small amount of money, which was 1,000 around 1,000 euros, the business was grown significantly.
Excellent. Okay.
What else? Also, in regard to mental health impact, now I don't have data with me, sorry, but I have included this in the final report, and also I have communicated to the external evaluator. There was a significant improvement of mental health situation in pre and post evaluation report, which was done by 4 psychologists of our center. So we have data, yes.
Yep, excellent.
And also the methods which were, and I forgot to mention that we still continue to be contact in these women, and we see on how to sustain this our and their efforts. For example, whenever there are cases when we have humanitarian aid from different organizations, and we ask for the items that they could further support in maintaining their businesses. Also with other funds, even though the funds for livelihood projects are very limited, unfortunately.
Yep.
So
And
now,
that's exactly where we are right now. We're trying to
yes,
find methods, and this is a
and
good
we are
idea.
happy that now we are implementing this now current project, which I hope. Actually, I believe that we will have the same results that we had with previous project.
Excellent.
And
So
we are very thankful to IRCT, and I could also mention the report that what was just presented. It's a very good report. It's a very good base for us, for all of us who are engaged, involved in those projects. So to go through it many times, because we learn a lot of things, a lot of components that we should include in our while during the implementation or while preparing the new application for the new livelihood projects.
okay. So here I'm also hearing, Charlotte, from you that this documentation we now have from your own project combined with this evaluation report will give you the data, right? It gives you verification. And I think this is really for all of us on the call. And then I'm going to ask that question. Have any of you considered, now that we have a very strong external evaluation, that you would use the evaluation report and attach it if you're applying for new funds anywhere as additional verification that this type of methodology works? Can I see, does anybody want to put your hand up if you've thought, hey, I might use this evaluation report as we move forward into looking for new funding? Any of the organizations online? Anyone want to speak to that?
2 hands up. We have
All
Eugenia
right.
and Ray.
Thank you. Eugenia, do you want to say a few words about what your thoughts are on using a documentation like this?
Yes. Oh, my camera is playing up.
You're good.
Yes, we will definitely. I mean, as Tree of Life, we are so grateful for the opportunity, and yes, we saw the benefits of the project, and quite a lot of things that came up are similar to what we experienced. And I think this document will go a long way to evidence, the work and the need to actually integrate livelihoods work with our mental health and psychosocial support rehabilitation work. Yes, we would really use it to evidence our work. And
Okay.
I like the recommendations, and those recommendations, together with the knowledge sharing spaces that we had, will actually help us in refining our future proposal applications.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then one follow-up question to you, Eugenia, because you see in the evaluation reference to, among others, poverty alleviation, poverty
Mhm.
reduction, a
Mhm.
connection to issues that are important for humanitarian donors.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, in the landscape, as we're looking for, and as Charlotte has rightly pointed out, it's also important to look for other donors who might be interested in this piece of work. Are there any other, obvious donors in the community in Zimbabwe that might be interested in seeing a piece of work that looks at poverty reduction, that looks at work around, leave no one behind, beyond the usual suspects for where you get your torture rehabilitation funding? What do you think?
That's an interesting question, Lisa. There are organizations that are there. Sorry about the background noise. There are donors, but you see, the kind of population that we work with, the survivors are a specific group, and so it's really difficult for me to confirm and say yes, they are there.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Charlotte, do you have any
yeah.
do you have any feedback there, Charlotte, when you hear Eugenia responding like that?
No, I think well, I think there are so many similarities, though, in livelihood support. So yes, it's a very specific group with very specific needs, and you are the only ones who can cater for those needs as a specialized center. But you could also maybe be the door opener or the pathway or the guiding hand to access some or tap into some other funds that are maybe livelihood specific, but you will be there to cater for the needs of the survivor. But there could be others, you know what I mean? Because when you actually, I mean, I've evaluated many projects on economic empowerment, women's economic empowerment, including in Zimbabwe, and you know, there are many that just work on livelihoods, and some of the issues are the same. You know, some of the issues that people face, torture survivor or not, face the same in terms of accessing and you know, really flourishing as a small entrepreneur or a micro enterprise, etc. So those issues can maybe be like a way there to tap into some of those other funds, knowing that you will be there to accompany the more mental health needs and you know, whatever health and disability issues might come.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I really like the fact
you.
that you are talking about the need to accompany them around the mental health, psychosocial support that they need so that they are ready to actually, to work with others. And I mean, like I said earlier, the fact that you've done this evaluation for us, IRCT, will evidence and that would convince and maybe attract more donors. So thank you so much for giving us the encouragement. And I think, yes, it's a process. Thank you.
All right. Now we got 3 hands up. Thanks very much, Eugenia.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Michael Kamu and then Michael Nekube.
Thank you so much. Is it me?
Actually, I had said Kai first, but are you ready to go, Kai? Is it okay?
Yeah, yes, it's quite okay.
Hand up. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, we'll get to you. No problem. Please.
Okay.
No, please, Michael. You can go ahead. So for me, it's okay. But if
all right, thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Let me first of all thank Charlotte for this great report. And what touched me most on the impact of this report when you are providing livelihood to survivors of torture and war trauma is when she mentioned that when the survivors get livelihood support, there's an issue of a decrease in suicide and depression, suicide thoughts and depression. That is so good because it's about mental health. Also, hope and self-confidence is also an issue which you mentioned, and breaking the self-imposed isolation. So there's a point which can be used actually looking for more funding from donors, because globally now, as you know, suicide have really increased. And September actually is the Suicide Prevention Month. And I think this is the right place to think about livelihood, because, for example, I'm working CVT in Kenya, and most of our survivors from the Great Lakes region and from Southern Sudan, actually, they are really suffering because of poverty. Poverty is an issue here. And you know, even now, globally, even the food rations, like in Kakuma refugee camp, where you have got refugees, the food rations have been completely reduced, and they are really suffering. And we just had a few months ago where a woman from Southern Sudan committed suicide in Kakuma refugee camp, Karabayai, because of poverty, lack of food for the children. So this is an area which I think need to be emphasized much, that livelihood is a component which works so well in supporting people reduce mental health issues. Thank you, back to you.
Thanks very much, Michael. All right, Kai, please, your turn.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. And yeah, actually, from my perspective, the external evaluation from Charlotte is very important. And thank you very much, Charlotte, for the one-to-one call, but even for sharing the recommendation today, because actually we can keep it as a balance with our past work and the future work, but even understanding much more better from your global expectations or maybe findings, and we can implement it. And I want to turn to Lisa's topics regarding how we can use it for our as a long-term impact, or maybe for future funding, even that for us in Albanian perspective was a challenge, but is even an innovative road, if we can say, a landscape, if we can say it like that, because it was a first-time project in terms of including livelihood support. So without IRCT, it was impossible to implement it, and we are very thankful to the IRCT for implementing this project. And actually, despite the fact that it was a pilot project, we have learned a lot, and we can use even the recommendations from Charlotte, maybe adjusting some activities or learning, and maybe add some other activities, maybe most oriented into beneficiary first, then rather than consultancy or something else. So yeah, again, thank you very much. And regarding the project, it fits very well within the Albanian EU integration. So even within the chapters, I have even the chapters in here, actually chapter 23 and chapter 19 regarding the social employment and social policies in the country. And this is one of the main chapters for Albanian, so including and in a perspective of the country where digitalization is high demanded, this is very feasible as inclusive scams for the torture survivors in the country. Another thing that I want to add, that this project combines pretty well within the psychosocial services, because we do see a change of the approach, not from a psychological and client beneficiary approach and service provider, but we see them more empowered, and I can add that in this manner of the project, they are operating as active agents of change. So we can see the beneficiary empowered through skills, employment, and dignity as well. So, and this is very important. It's a little bit challenged, to be sincere with you all, because we do have a lot of demand from other beneficiaries, etc., to be part of future project, and somehow the fund and the lack of funding might be an obstacle. That's why we use to realize a memorandum of understanding, and here is the power of communication and the advocacy in terms of a long-term impact about the memorandum of understanding, despite the fact that maybe we cannot offer it forever as a service, but through the avocation and establishment of the memorandum of understanding, we can create a new pathways for employment for the victims in the country. And engaging within the state institution, we can see reduced barriers and maybe breaking somehow the stigma of the survivors. So yeah, that's all from my end regarding the question. I don't know if you have, Lisa, further questions.
One follow-up, yeah, because it was interesting to see of the projects. There were a couple of organizations members who obviously chose a route where they were approaching local government to advocate with local government. They should be doing this piece of work, and there was some interaction there. Why did you choose that route instead of just hiring a consultant and doing it yourself?
Mostly among the torture survivors in the country, especially in the Albanian market, it's very difficult to engage with the state institutions because we do not have a clear framework, especially a legal framework for inclusive politics. But engaging as a civil society organization within the state institution is very important. Because we can create a bridge between the different actors and maybe building sustainable solutions for a long-term impact. So are somehow challenges connecting with the state institutions, even from our perspective as an NGO, despite the fact that we have been advocating for around 30 years. But when it comes to connect with the state institution, there are some challenges in terms of politics, in terms of having a real impact by the state officials, and pushing them into making the real changes. So I want to thank Lisa. I want to thank even Roberto and Maiva for reaching out in terms of advocacy, because in Albania we do have a review of the constitution this year and the legal and civil procedure, and this project in terms of livelihood support would be very good to have it inclusive, maybe for a long-term impact in terms of changing somehow the current legal framework for the right to rehabilitation, remuneration, and reparation of the torture survivors in the country, including not only scams for the remuneration, but even for the livelihood support or livelihood rehabilitation.
Excellent. And Mike, before I go to you, Mike Nakube, thanks very much from Albania. Are there any other people on the call who are thinking, this approach to advocate with local government in order to demonstrate, now you have an external evaluation in addition to your own documentation. Are there any others on the call who think, that might be something I would be able to do now? Because Charlotte has talked very much about, we want this to be, well, you're doing holistic work. And if you're able to do something where, as far as, sustainability or additional funding, some local government services might be willing to be connected with at certain times, not always. But is there anybody out there who sees this kind of opportunity in front of them? And then the ARCT Center in Albania could be your go-to peer support for how to get that done. Looking across my screen here.
Can I add something? Lisa? Maybe.
Sure. While we wait for hands, go ahead.
So in terms of actually, we take these initiatives even comparing with comparative practices, actually doing an analysis, and I think is very crucial for future works, but not only in terms of a local perspective, but including it even in an international perspective. Actually, we have seen a good example from the United States, some centers in Minnesota and California, torture treatment centers in those countries used to integrate livelihood support, but in terms of job readiness, English language learning, and we used to adapt it in our Western Balkans small world, let's say like that.
Okay. So good copy. So there's been some peer learning, and
Yeah.
we are more than happy. I think it's great to hear you do it on your own. We can also help to facilitate if there's a need. And the group that we had, this peer group that met continuously over time, I think that also demonstrates that. Yeah. So thanks a lot for that. I'm going to go to Mike Nakube, and it was the original question about, how are you, moving into this? Is there a catalytic impact? Is there an advocacy angle? And can you use this valuation, which is external now, to go to any other donors in your environment? Because now you see that this really works, and it has the perspective with humanitarian perspective of poverty reduction, and a very special niche, but a very important part of poverty reduction, and also working with those who are often left behind. Mike, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, I would like, pardon my voice. I had flu. I had flu. I'd like to thank IRCT for implementing this project. It came in timely. We have always had a question from people that we've been working with over the years. One question has been, how about the children? Because we're working with adults. So we've been referring them to people, to organizations that work with children who experienced traumatic experiences when the adults were being abused. And then the other question here has always been, and then after we've journeyed with them in their healing journeys, they say, okay, what next? Now they're feeling much better. So what next to sustain that? Meaning, as long as they don't have economic power, they will slip backwards, because of the need to regain their economic independence and also confidence as well. In terms of the question, I think Eugenia has nailed it. He has said it very well. That's what we would do. We would use this comprehensive report, evaluation report from Charlotte. Thank you, Charlotte, for the comprehensive report and the recommendations as well. Otherwise, with our participants, when we refer them to other organizations for economic livelihoods, it's different from the way we work with them, because those livelihood organizations may not make sure that the principles of do no harm, the principles of trauma-informed care when they're working with the traumatized people are adhered to. So when we started working with them, they showed a lot of change and they really appreciated, because we worked there with them from a healing perspective with trauma-informed care practices in every step as we were working with them. And even the people that were helping us, we made sure that they join with them in a nice way, in a way that is appreciated, in a way that is respectful, in a way that is healing and bring confidence back. Otherwise, I don't have any more. Thank you very much. My colleague Eugenia has said so much on that. Thank you. Over.
Interesting. But Mike, really interesting to hear that when you were partnering with livelihoods organizations, as I understood correctly, you would be also helping them to understand that this particular group of vulnerable people need a trauma-informed care, a continued trauma-informed care, no? So you were trying to partner with other organizations that could do the technical backstopping for the livelihoods piece.
Yes, what we'll do is in the past, we refer our groups to livelihood organizations, and those livelihood organizations may not them as groups from survivors groups. They will take them as individuals, and they will do their work in their normal way. But now we're focused on these groups that we have worked with them, we have journeyed with them for a period, and they appreciate it, and it changed a lot of things. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for that explanation. Okay, Mohammed, are you? You've got your hand up. Would you like to come to the mic? And maybe just which question are you responding to? Because now we have a couple in play, all very important. Mohammed, please.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I don't have any question. I just want to appreciate Ms. Charlotte for her comprehensive and insightful evaluation report. Although she confessed that it was a helicopter view of the 19 projects, but it was really insightful and detailed. That has also established the HDU's standpoint that there is a strong link between the torture, livelihood, and the mental health. And for that purpose, you know well that HTU has conducted a detailed study in the LMICs that was also carried by the torture journal. Charlotte has rightly pointed out that livelihood support has sped up the healing process. And we have felt it and we have observed it that it really worked in a way that our beneficiaries produce very positive results, both in terms of their psychosocial well-being and overall livelihood well-being. And you would have certainly seen our report that we were supposed to achieve the target of 120 beneficiaries, but our end beneficiaries were 520. I just want to share here that about the sustainability. Although we have been without any external support for the last 6 months, but the way we launched this project and implemented this project We had the opportunity to share with Charlotte during one-to-one meeting, the virtual meeting. But I am afraid she forgot to mention that HTU has introduced a new strategy that whatever we had invested in the beadwork, the beadcraft centers, we have devised a strategy that the input cost would be recycled, and our beneficiaries, our prisoners are still working on that strategy, and without any external support. They have started incurring the cost of the input, the beads we used to provide them from the project. Now they are in a position, they are well placed to buy on their own. Right now, we are our beneficiaries are working earlier prisons, but we have right now increased one more prison. We are also providing them the skill development support, in the sense to teach them that how to diversify the products, how to get the psychosocial support back. Although the main component of the psychosocial support was missing from the project. There was no resource allocation for the psychological rehabilitation. As you know well, that it is imperative for all those even the former torture victims, that sometimes their traumatic condition continue to prevail for years. So they are supposed to have, they need to have sort of psychological support, and the HTO is providing them the psychological support on pro bono basis, as well as the legal support we are still providing them. So this
Thank
is
you,
the
Mohammed.
sustainable
Yep.
HTO has been implementing. Thank you so much.
Yep. You're welcome. And this it speaks to, as I'm hearing it, one of the aspects of, complementarity, right? So don't do a standalone project. Those, I think, that Charlotte was pointing out, were more successful or had a greater impact, are those where it was actually integrated with either ongoing services, right, or linked to others who are partnering with them. So, I hear recognition and a verification that complementarity and doing a holistic approach, not standalone projects that only focus on, right, income livelihoods. I'm also hearing this thing about leveraging, right? So you want to leverage and be able to use now this data that you have collected, with respect to other donors, to leverage a position so you can actually, advocate for more funding in future. So not just with us, but with other donors. So in closing, we have time for one more person, a couple minutes response. And I thought I had one more hand. Now I'm just double checking. I thought I had one more hand, but maybe not. I will then.
There's Zumi from Golden Legend Celt Foundation, I think.
Please. Okay. Please, it's your turn at the mic. Thank you.
Okay, hello, good afternoon from Nigeria. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for this report. We're currently implementing a livelihood project integrated into our psychosocial support program that we are doing thanks to IRCT. This report is very timely for us, even though we are at the last phase of the project, of the livelihood project that we're currently implementing, but it's very important for us to look at this so that we can also channel it to future funding. So thank you. Some of the I looked at the report, and some of the things that I saw there are some of the realities that we have on ground when we were implementing this project, because this is like the first time that we are integrating livelihood into our programs, and so partnership with government agency is something that we are also exploring. But some of the challenges that we've seen not really on the livelihood in our previous programs is sustainability with the government agencies. So in Nigeria, when there's change of government, it's like when the next person comes, they have another idea of what they want to do. And so how do we ensure that even if you bring a new idea, the existing one doesn't die completely? Because the Correctional Act, Service Act of the 2019, currently implemented in Nigeria, makes provision for rehabilitation and, including livelihood, to make sure that people who are in corrections are busy and they get the skills that the employable skills when they come out. And so this is not really implemented because it looks like it falls back on the NGOs, to go there and provide this support. There's no funding from the government, but I really don't know how we can navigate it. It's still an advocacy that is going on for it to be budgeted for. Livelihood should be budgeted for, and they should become employed so that when they come out, it reduces the rate of recidivism. So thank you.
A very valid point, and one of the big challenges we work with. It might be part of the legislation, but is it actually being implemented? I don't know, Charlotte, if you have any comments to that, or it is that reality is what we navigate in. The only thing I would say, Umi, is also assessing, what does the donor landscape look like? Are there any other, interesting donors who might say, exactly this piece about job training, for people, because it's a poverty reduction or it's an income generation piece. I think that's the thing of, and now that you have such a strong evidence base with an external evaluation of a global where you were part of a global, or you will be, you are. So I'm going to, in closing, ask Anthony, and Anthony, unfortunately, I think I missed you before, so that's my apology to you.
No
We just
problem.
have two last minutes, but please, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for this opportunity, and the external evaluations feedbacks are very fantastic, interesting to hear. And I would see from the project, not only the latter part of the project where the implementation taken place in our country. So I would appreciate that we would understand how the project was managed from this monthly review meeting conducted by Berta. So other countries were included. How the project was from the initial itself is managed. So that learning should include. There are fantastic learning there, where every month we were there, and the monthly meeting really helped us to have a comprehensive understanding. So I would suggest that from the beginning, from the end, how this project was managed, how effective the timelines were encountered, how we effectively understand what are the common indicators that we have achieved as IRCT team, including all of us. What are the specific indicators? For example, so in Sri Lanka, that we through this project we were able to interact with the banks, right? We were enabled to the cooperative sector to bring in. So, and natural and social capitals, we try to bring all together, sustain the intervention that we have implemented. That kind of how much of the sustainable indicators were brought in, social indicators. Social capital indicators, financial accumulative indicators, how we are clever of achieved that. Of course, this project have achieved a lot in terms of economic, in terms of psychological aspects. For Sri Lanka now, still we have a building now. In the project, we didn't have the money for the building, so now we have the building. We were able to convince the government to have a building for us.
There we go.
So our capitals were kept there. Our machines, our leather machines were kept there. The other people also coming there.
Yeah.
The other beneficiaries also coming there, having now the center for training for them. Here the social capital is, the survivors have a collective healing support.
I think
The rest of the community also coming there.
Excellent.
So interesting.
Really.
Sincerely, thank you for that kind of. There are a lot of learnings.
Yeah,
There are a
good
lot
copy.
of learnings has happened here.
And
So
we'll
we'll try to
continue,
share
Anthony,
this.
to keep you connected, and we'll continue because I know there's so much more. And I don't mean to cut you off, but we really realize that, and we have all the data with respect to your project, and this was a very important place that there's a sustainable aspect. There's also a physical location now,
Great. Yeah.
and
This
it,
was
it
a
serves dual purpose. And as far
Yeah.
as complementarity and again leveraging. But I think the point, and I will just conclude by saying that thank you very much for mentioning that these continuous meetings, and Berta was excellent at really, continuously meeting each month, creating the safe space. And I think we'll take the learnings in our next strategic period. We're going to take what Charlotte has pointed out with,
Great.
we could have a better framework around this. And I think we should look at the theory of change, and we
Yeah.
will, to identify, are there some more systematic ways we could keep ourselves stringent around this as we move forward. And it could be that some of you are part of this project, and it's not because you have funding from IRCT, but maybe you have funding from others, but we still need to continue to have the dialogue with you and keep that contact moving. Yeah. So I'm going to say in closing, and Charlotte, would you like to say a few words? Because I think this has been a nice process that we could also come back. You could use your voice and your words to highlight what is otherwise a really important, useful project program evaluation for us.
No, just thanks to all. And I see in the chat that some people have asked for the report, and I think it is available. So you can just share the link maybe in the chat, or but it is available. Just to say that. Yeah,
Voila.
so that's all. And also, I just wanted to emphasize again that you have a strong case, all of you. I mean, you should really go out and use that knowledge now, because I think this is an area where there is potential and scope for fundraising, not losing your expertise, but bring that with you into more livelihoods type of projects. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Good copy. Thanks very much. And everyone, always check our website. That's where under reports you'll find, and you scroll down the page, you'll find all the evaluations. I think there are 4 current ones. You can have a look there, review and evaluations. Thanks very much, everyone, for being with us for this time. And you will be hearing more from us as we continue this work. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Thank you so
Take care,
much.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Anthony,
Thank you.
Kay, Muhammad, Kaho.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye,
for joining, Kaho.
Everyone.
Hey,
James,
nice
say
to
hi.
see you.
Bye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Take care of
Bye.
your flu.
Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye,
you.
Chuyeta. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye. Thank you too.
Cool.
Adiós, Jenny.
Adiós, Dios.
Que vaya bien.
Muy bien, muy bien.